Ones are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. School choice. It's up for discussion once again today. And it's very clear. This is going to be one of the defining issues of the upcoming legislative session here in Idaho. And I suppose that's a good thing. One of the things, though, that I find very curious is that the press already is lining up and taking a very strong advocacy position against school choice. A case in point, let's look at this headline from Idaho Capital Sun. This was an article by Kelsey Mosley Morris published yesterday. Poll. Many Idaho voters unfamiliar with, look at the air quote or the quotation marks here, school choice policy debate. And then a little added editorial in the headline, legislators say controversial K through 12 policy will be a priority this session. Now, I'm not trying to be mean when I say this, and I'm not trying to be controversial, but controversial according to whom? According to teachers' unions, according to, reporters, according to certain politicians, according to collectivists. It would be really helpful if we understand who exactly sees that as controversial. Because for parents who are looking out for their children and who just want the best for their kids, this is not a controversial thing at all, except to the degree that there are people trying to stop them from having that choice. Let's take a look at the first couple lines of the article. Likely voters across Idaho showed strong support for more education funding and mixed support for school choice and education savings accounts in a poll commissioned by the Mountain States Policy Center. But a large segment of likely voters in Idaho weren't familiar with the policy idea, there are those quotation marks, of school choice that Idaho lawmakers expect to be a centerpiece in the upcoming legislative session, which starts in less than a month. Now, look, I understand not everybody follows policy. Not everybody is going to be, up to speed on what exactly is meant by this policy choice or that policy choice. But isn't that kind of the job of the media, to help put the facts out there, help educate us, as opposed to simply put scary words? It's controversial, that's a controversial thing that they're talking about there. But I'm going to go even further, and I want you to see the definition in this article in the Idaho Capital Sun of what is meant by school choice. This is one of the most narrow definitions I've ever seen. On the subject of school choice, 40% of those polled said they had a favorable opinion of school choice as an educational policy. That's actually pretty solid numbers. But 35% said they'd never heard of it. Okay, not surprising. Maybe that's just not the stage of life where they are, where they're thinking about their kids or even their grandkids' education. Listen to this definition, though. School choice is a debate over funding for public education. Okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to correct Kelsey a little bit here. School choice can include a debate over funding for public education. That is a facet of school choice. It's not the sum total. So let's not pretend that, all it is it's a debate over funding for public education. Now, she says it often includes discussion of programs such as vouchers or education savings accounts, which is true, that would allow families to use tax dollars that support students in public schools. And I'm going to say this a different way, that could be used to support the public school system to instead pay for other educational pursuits such as private school or homeschooling. But see, there's the presumption that, any tax dollar or any dollar that's collected by the state that somebody else uses, for something other than public schools is being taken away from the public schools, as if that money belongs to the public schools. Now, if I can be perfectly honest with you, I don't think vouchers are such a great thing. Now, I'm not even aware of anybody pushing for vouchers right now, but that's just one form of school choice. Some people find that that might be a good way to do it. My objection to vouchers is simply this. That money, which rightfully belongs to the taxpayers before it's taxed away from them, nobody can claim, hey, that's ours. This is what we hear public school advocates do all the time, though. This takes our money away. It's not your money. You didn't earn it. The taxpayer earned it. And the problem with vouchers is when that money is taken away through taxation, it has to pass through the administrative hands of various bureaucrats and functionaries and programs before parents are allowed to put it to use, which means it's always going to come with strings attached. I would much rather see something, and this is just my personal preference, something like either education savings account or maybe even a tax tuition credit or tuition tax credit, rather, in which the money stays in the parent's pocket. They don't pay that on their taxes or they're forgiven that on their taxes because instead of the cost that would be incurred of sending their child to a public school, they are taking care of those costs out of their own pocket, and they have the money that otherwise would have been spent on taxes to do that. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to do it. But I'm just saying there are different ways to approach this. We're supposed to believe it's one size fits all, and the only definition of school choice is it's all about public school funding. I mean, it's all about me. It's all about me, and sadly, it's not all about you. I'm sorry. There are alternatives out there, and some of them are a better choice. But see, we'll never know that if we don't have competition. Back to this is the poll done by Mountain States Policy Center. The state of Idaho currently spends $8,900 per student for public education. Now, there is a proposal to give parents control of that money through an education savings account. These accounts would allow parents to take all of the state funding for public education and spend it on the school or program of their family's choosing. Knowing this, would you support or oppose Idaho implementing education savings accounts? Look how many people strongly agree. 47%. For a controversial subject, those are actually pretty respectable numbers, enough so that you can hardly say, well, this is just some fringe, idea, and only, people way out there on the far right are encouraged by this sort of talk. No, there are parents of all different types who are looking for alternatives. Now, there was an interesting tweet that Brandon Durst sent out saying the most important part of this poll, in his opinion, is the results on the support for ESAs. Nearly 60% of Republicans support them. So, why isn't the Idaho legislature doing something about that? Well, maybe they will during this session. That said, he says, I think the numbers in North Idaho are really strange and don't make sense. Now, this is where Reclaim Idaho, in the form of Luke Mayville, stepped up. And Luke says, well, this poll claims to show support for ESAs, in other words, school vouchers. As in our last episode, we understood that Luke is one of those people for whom everything I don't like is a voucher. But he says, look at that polling question. It doesn't mention the word private or that ESAs can be used for private schools. You can almost feel the distaste of saying that word private. Ugh, what a horrible thing. Undoubtedly, he says, many respondents assumed choice means choice of different public programs. In other words, your choice is found here within the public school system and nowhere else. Thankfully, someone was paying attention. I love this response from Benjamin Braddock. Even though I think vouchers are terrible, he says it needs to be said that your last sentence is pure conjecture. And it is. It's the assumption that, well, anything good that happens outside of the public school system is somehow destroying the public school system, or that any attempt to offer choice to parents and students is, meant strictly to destroy the public school system. Now, look, I understand why some of the proponents of the public school system are a little bit nervous. The report cards don't just come out for the kids. There are report cards that measure how are the students doing academically, and it does not look good in all areas. I mean, I'm not saying that, it's a complete and total failure. These things ought to go away tomorrow. But there's enough failing aspect to what's happening in public schools. It's very understandable why parents want to have an alternative. And to just continue, well, but we want that, but we need, that's our money. Marcia, it's all about me, It's not. It's about the students. And so we need to remember that it's if you want choice, it's not there. Choice is not there to destroy the public good. It's not there to harm people. Trapping kids in failing government schools, though, by taking away any semblance of choice, now that can be a danger to the republic. One of the ways that it's a danger is that primarily we are seeing that the people who are finding themselves in positions of power in the educational hierarchy tend to lean to the left, sometimes very hard to the left. And if they're Republican, many of them still are very collectivist in their thinking as well as their actions. Those are things that are not compatible with a free people and a republic that respects personal liberty, private property rights, etc., limited government for that matter. So I'm going to finish up with just a final thought here. This is from the great Milton Friedman. One of the great mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. I understand that people within the public school system, my wife is a public school teacher, and I understand the best of intentions exist. But if the system itself is experiencing failure, the cure for that failure may not be to take a sledgehammer to the system and demolish the whole thing. I know there are some people who feel that way. I think it may work for some people. I think that some people would still avail themselves of it, if nothing else. What am I going to do? Stay home and watch the kids? No, that's what school's for. Sorry, but there are people who do adopt that mindset. Competition is the surest thing to bring changes that need to be made. And absent that competition, there is no chance that you're going to see our public schools make the kind of changes that need to be made on their own. They're going to have to make those changes because otherwise they will lose more of their student base, more of those warm bodies sitting in seats by which they get their funding. So don't look at school choice as, this is all about just taking a torch to the public school system. It's not. It's about looking at the kids who will be educated, putting their needs first, including over the needs of a system that is struggling. Okay, I'm not even saying failing at this point, but definitely struggling. And in some areas, yes, you could actually call it failure. Give that choice a chance. Give competition a chance. And watch these problems work themselves out. We're not little children who need to have things explained to us. Well, obviously, you don't understand. This is talking about private schools and private vouchers. No! I understand competition is scary if you want to maintain control, if you wish to maintain a monopoly. The bigger question is, how's that working out for the kids? If the answer is, well, in some cases it isn't, then let's let choice be the rule rather than the exception. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see.
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.